Due to technical difficulties, we now join Nerds on Ice, already in progress.
She's still, if her connection is still with us. Ruthless Lala, you still there with us?
I think she might have left the building.
There was a lot of talk. There was going and everything, and so like I wanted y'all to be able to hear each other before I said something. So this is your comfortability. You know what I'm saying? This is what I want to see. This is where you're comfortable at. So go out there and fucking do your shit. I'm gonna be watching. All right, my dude, go handle your shit. Hi, I'm sorry. I've been like motivational speakings and like getting the boys ready for like their matches and stuff. Like I can't stop moving you. I'm sorry.
Well, see now it's a good thing that you mentioned that. It's a good thing you mentioned that because you're being, as you mentioned earlier before the show, you're pretty much the only female in this group of guys that you know. So not only are you a black woman, you're a black woman, and that shows even more representation. So tell me what that means for you.
Man, like I love it here. Like I was seeing you guys earlier, like SWF, Southern Wrestling Federation, in Tullahoma, Tennessee, at the Gypsy Drill. I love it here. Like I've never been in the locker rooms where so many guys came and like talked to me and asked me for advice or asked me to watch their matches.
Signal might be going bad. Give her a second, but
like they had the uttermost respect. I think right where I saw it, I was like, "Oh shit!" But like, no, like they have the uttermost respect for me, and so for the fact that like they come and ask me, like, there's one kid here. His name is Christian Cross. Like he used to watch me wrestle here, and he got into wrestling. And here about 2 weeks ago, his first belt on him, and like I couldn't be more proud, you know what I'm saying, so far, and like, he just keep getting better. And like, so the fact that so many people, so many guys here, you know, actually wants to hear my opinion and wants me for critiques and wants to ask me to watch their match, like I feel honored in itself. I hope y'all heard me.
Oh yeah. John, here's the question I want to throw out to everybody. COVID-19 putting a damper on a lot of things, you know, the WWE and having these certain matches, and now NXT just canceled one of their major events, which was to take place this weekend. John, what does that mean for, you know, wrestling, at least for this year? You know, we're hoping for next year to be a little more open and everything's, you know, petered out. But what does that mean for not just the representation, but just the sports entertainment field and wrestling as a whole? What do you think?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I feel like this show is happening at my show's happening at a perfect time because with COVID going on there, like the world kind of took a break for a while. Like, we're gonna slow down and get everything figured out. And then the whole George Floyd thing stuff happened. So it's like now it's kind of forcing people to realize, like, hey, this is what Black people have been saying forever. We've having these issues, and like you guys are finally seeing it now. Because like usually, like if it wasn't COVID, like let's say something happens to George Floyd, the next day that something else happens, we just completely forget about the George Floyd stuff. But because like all the protests and all the riots and everything, like everyone's kind of took a moment to go, hey, this is a serious issue. We need to try to fix this. So like I announced my show in like June. I was like, well, if I have a show in August, maybe everything like COVID will be whatever, we'll have a handle on it, and I'll be able to have my show like normal. But unfortunately, living in Iowa, COVID's kind of still a big issue. So I mean, the building we're running at hosts 5,000, but we only have 300 because we want people to be able to spread out as much as they want to, so they won't have to worry about being close to anybody.
Espirito?
Yeah, so I know just where I travel out of, I primarily wrestle out of the Ohio area, but right now I've had to go pretty much all over the Midwest because Ohio hasn't been able to hold wrestling. So I've been traveling a lot to like the Chicago area, to Indiana, places that I'm allowed and able to wrestle. And even then, you know, it's all socially distanced, it's all spread out. So thankfully, at least there are the precautions that are being taken care of. But it's definitely a weird time, you know, on the independent scene because you're used to, you know, trying to pack crowds and trying to get as many people as possible. Whereas to now, you know, you're seeing shows sold out just because the crowds are limited. So I'm seeing a lot of creative promoters. I think that's kind of been a really cool aspect of it, is seeing how creative everyone has been able to get with outdoor shows, being able to host, you know, the different venues. So it's definitely been different, but surprisingly, you know, like wrestling always has been able to, it's adapted. And there's still been a lot of successful promotions that have been able to find ways to make it work.
Rod Lee.
Well, like they've said, like you've been having to get with my grandfather, and he's like he's older, so I don't want to bring something back home to him. But like things like the social distancing, you're limiting capacity people. I mean, that's the reason I didn't travel to Iowa. Limiting the amount of people I I shouldn't have gone. So I'm just doing the best I can as time goes on while still trying to keep myself and my family safe.
Ruthless Lala, you with us? She may not be with us.
Our phone might have died.
Yeah, very much. So like I said, this was about black representation. Well, just representation of color in general in the wrestling world. Who were your heroes coming up? Who did you look up to? What made you decide to get into the game of wrestling? Let's start, since you're on my screen, Espirito. We'll start with you.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, the Hispanic heritage, we have our big idols that we look up to. So obviously the big names, you've got your Eddie Guerrero, your Rey Mysterio. But actually what was like my biggest draw when I first started watching were actually the Mexicools. Which looking back now, like you don't even think about like the overall just cheesiness of having, these three Hispanic wrestlers that are riding their Juan Deeres, lawnmowers. As an adult, I look back and I'm like, wow, that's like super fucking stereotypical. But you have Hoovy, you have Psychosis, you have Super Crazy, three of the best, luchadors out at that time, and still some of them currently going now. Just the sheer antics of it, that's what drove me in. And I always loved watching the Hispanic wrestlers just because, like this mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of representation, especially back then. So when they came out and did their antics and just had fun, like that hit so much more to me. So I loved watching them. I loved, just keeping up on that and being able to, just cheer them on. And for me, that was kind of what hit, those Eddie Guerreros, those Mysterios, the Mexicools, and wanting to continue and just have fun and pursue that passion. So I'd say those five overall were like some of the biggest inspirations for me growing up.
Rod Lee?
Well, I kind of started watching wrestling back like 2003, 2004. And my number one guy was Shelton Benjamin. I thought he was just the dopest dude in the world.
Yep.
And in fact, his match with Shawn Michaels for the, I think it was like for a heavyweight tournament on Raw, that's one of the reasons I started watching wrestling. That was a dope match. But then I got into guys like Booker T, Monty Brown over at TNA. Like I was a TNA kid growing up too, so I really liked his stuff. Him and Elix Skipper. Then you got like Ron Simmons, and I was really into Bobby Lashley. Like I watched the Ruthless Aggression era, and seeing this big black dude just destroying people, I was like, I can get down with this. So that was, and he kind of influenced my style in a way because I'm a big black dude and I like destroying people.
John.
Well, it's funny because I watched wrestling when I was a kid, but I didn't understand what was going on. Like I didn't really see, I didn't know how wrestling worked. I just thought I saw dudes throwing each other around. Like when I actually got into wrestling, like started watching it more, like guys like The Rock, guys like Ahmed Johnson, stuff like that. Like guys like, that's what I liked. And then, like when I actually started wrestling back in 2009, 2010, I started people started comparing me like to Rufus Hart Jones and like Coco Beware. So I started watching their stuff, and I was like, oh, I am kind of like that. I mean, I'm a little different now. I think I'm more close to Keith Lee than anything else because I'm 300 pounds and I do backflips and front flips and stuff. So yeah, like guys like Rufus Hart Jones are like ones that I started watching after I started wrestling. Like even guys like Dusty Rhodes, who like say back then I didn't know Dusty Rhodes' character was supposed to be like he's like a southern black dude pretty much. Like that was his gimmick. Like I didn't like he said I didn't know that. But I mean I know that now because I know wrestling more. But back then I was like, oh, I like that guy. He kind of sounds like me a little bit. I didn't know the whole black and white thing. I just knew that Dusty Rhodes sounds like he moves like me, sounds like me. Like I thought that's what like that. I didn't know that was like a kind of a racist thing to do. But as a kid, you don't really know that kind of stuff. You just you watch it to be entertained.
So you mentioned Rod Lee. You mentioned the Raw era, which I like to really entertain myself and call it the Attitude Era, or and the WCW, which was like the NWO era. When you seen people like the NOI, or the was it Nation of Destruction when it was The Rock and D-Lo and
Nation of Domination.
Yeah, all those guys. Yeah, Nation of Domination. Seeing those, and I do believe that's like probably one of the first times like when Rock was really starting to show.
Yeah.
Booker T was doing his thing. What did it mean seeing these guys, come to the forefront, and of both factions, of both houses of WCW and WW at the time WWF, but now it's not WWE. What did it mean to see these guys come up after seeing them for so many years? Like Booker T, watching him and his brother as Harlem Heat, and now finally he's out on his own doing his thing. What did that look like for you guys? And for Espirito, what did it look like seeing it? I look at your mask and I always think of Rey Mysterio. I just found him to be engaging, entertaining to watch because he was like the shortest guy amongst all these people, and yet he was handling his business. What did it mean to see all these guys come out around that time?
Well, for me, it's kind of weird because, again, I didn't start watching wrestling until like 2004. So I started kind of getting all these old tapes and stuff like that. And that's when I found out about The Rock. And The Rock is who kind of really made me go, man, wrestling is the best thing in the world. Because he could really do it all. He could really have these high octane matches. He could just go out there and just be entertaining by talking, listening to. I still just go around when I'm at work. I'll put on some YouTube and listen to old Rock promos because they're just so entertaining and you're just so captivated by everything he says. And just seeing someone like that get their due and become a 5-time, I think he's a 7 or 8-time WWE champion now. But and during the Attitude Era, you get the top belt 5 times, and it's just seeing somebody like that, somebody who's so talented, so naturally charismatic, get that due is a really good thing to see because it shows oh man, if you're really good, people are going to notice you no matter what. And that's how I feel. I just need to keep getting better, and people are going to keep noticing me because no matter what tries to hold me down, I'm going to make it to where I believe I deserve to be.
Espirito.
Yeah, so I'd say on my end, especially with WCW, if you were, lucha libre or a certain body type, you were pretty much relegated to the cruiserweight division. And WCW was very adamant that if you were in the cruiserweight division, you weren't going to be contending, for the heavyweight title or any of those others unless you gained, surmountable size. So when they got to the more modern era where cruiserweights could contend and there's the opportunity of anyone at any size can compete, that was a huge I guess just change of pace for me because I would get used to seeing Rey Mysterio work the cruiserweights, work the Jamie Nobles, work the Paul Londons, and have these great matches. And then unfortunately I feel once Eddie passed, he kind of got that exposure that Rey Mysterio was able to do a lot of things that Eddie Guerrero could do, as well as these acrobatic things that a lot of the mainstream wrestling fans may not have been known to seeing. So when he started having those matches, with the Batistas and the Undertakers and the larger capacity wrestlers, I think it was really nice to see that the cruiserweight style can work, with larger wrestlers, with the heavyweights, and being able to have him hoist the World Heavyweight Championship, in honor of Eddie Guerrero after he passed. I think it changed a lot of eyes that, cruiserweight wrestlers can compete with heavyweights. Granted, they're not going to out-muscle them, they're not going to outpower them, but that the speed game in wrestling is, just as, effective as just being able to outmuscle somebody.
John.
Yeah, that's another thing that's funny because, I don't remember much about the Nation of Domination, when they were around, but looking back on it now, I don't get why were they the bad guys? They were right about everything. That's why it's kind of funny. When you watch wrestling, nowadays, people like Jinder Mahal when he was champion, everything he said was right. When he speaks in his language, people boo him. Why are you booing him? You're being intolerant. So I think it's kind of funny that say look back on wrestling history now, a lot of stuff that we think that this guy was a bad guy, this guy was a good guy. It's maybe we should look at that differently. Look at Stone Cold. Stone Cold beat up his boss. We all have that dream of beat up your boss, but he should be the bad guy.
Stone Cold has been my favorite because of beating up his boss.
Yeah, he should be the bad guy. But I feel especially nowadays, or even the last couple of years, we live in the age of rebels. Star Wars, all the Star Wars, there is the rebels rebelling against the higher power. And I feel like that's why like a lot of wrestling now, we have like the cool heels or like the guys who want to be a badass, and this and that. It's like those technically those are the guys we want to cheer for. It's just that we all live vicariously. We live vicariously through them. Like, okay, like this guy's he's bucking the system. He wants to be the bad guy. He said no to his boss. I mean, we all want to do that. That's why I think like when we see wrestle like that, we kind of gravitate towards them because it's like why like this guy can do that, then why can't I do that? So we kind of want to be the rebel a little bit.
So now going forward, like I said, what's the next step for wrestling? What do you think is the next era for wrestling? Not just for your organization, but for the bigger organization like the NXTs, or the WWEs. What do you think would be the next logical step going forward post COVID?
Well, I think like, especially like within the having fans right now, like you can't, like people always say, oh, you listen to what the fans want. Some people say, oh, wrestling's too predictable. Like there's nothing wrong with being predictable. Because like obviously, like if too many people think it's gonna happen, then maybe it should happen. Like that's nothing wrong with that. I feel like a lot of like wrestling, like they try to like, oh, we're gonna have a plot twist. Like you think it's gonna happen, we're gonna switch it up. And I feel like you kind of lose fans' trust that way. Like I mean, granted, you don't want the fans dictating what happens on your show, but you also want to like look, hey, if all the fans, if 99% of the fans want this, maybe we should give them what they want. Granted, they may change their mind down the road, but at least you listen to it. Like look at the Becky Lynch and Kofi thing. Like the fans wanted Becky, the fans wanted Kofi. Like look how big that WrestleMania was. I mean, granted, the fans turned on Becky, but it's like at least you gave them what they want. Like okay, when you listen to your fans, good things can happen. But I feel like WWE, one of their biggest problems is the fact that they'll say, oh, like they right now they have like the Hurt Business, Bobby Lashley, MVP, and Shelton. I feel like the only reason they're utilizing those guys is because what's going on in the world. We have all this racial tension. I feel like that's the only reason why they're even using these guys to the capacity they are, because they want to show, okay, yeah, we support our black wrestlers, we support this and that. But let's say when COVID's over, let's see if they're going to keep that same energy, because I don't think they will.
What do you think, Rod?
It's tricky. I mean, I feel like John really hit the nail on the head with what he said. Like sometimes they just try to do a plot twist for the sake of doing a plot twist. You're like, well, this is what people think is going to happen, so let's do something else. Like, and when it comes to storytelling, which I was always taught that wrestling is supposed to be telling a story, that doesn't work. Why would you do that? I understand wanting to have a plot twist. I understand wanting to like say we're going one way, but sow seeds like, oh, something else was happening the whole time. That's good writing, but don't just say, okay, this is the story we're telling. Let's just start telling a different story halfway through. That being said, I really want to see like genuine representation, because a lot of times when things like this happen, where the racial tension starts spiking in America, people do a lot of like faux activism, where they're like, oh yeah, we support this person or we support that person, and then they do it for like 5 minutes until everyone stops looking. They draw and they go back to what they were doing. And like I like the Hurt Business personally. I want to see more of it. I don't really like the whole retribution thing. I think that's really weird, and I don't know where they're gonna go with that. I kind of want it to go nowhere, but it's one of those things where I just want to see genuine change. And it's not just something that happens overnight, and it's not something that, is going to be easy to have happen. But, with stuff like Black Wrestlers Matter happening and other, like the fact that we're having the conversations we're having now on like such a large scale kind of shows that we are moving towards that change. And I just want to see us as a nation keep addressing the elephant in the room and start moving towards making it better.
All right. Espirito, and then we might have a special guest with us. Go ahead, Espirito.
Yeah, so I think on our end with the Hispanic culture, I just want to see a lot more of just the possibility of a mainstream champion. Like I said, it's been since Eddie Guerrero, which was back in 2004, 2005 with Rey Mysterio too. But I feel like there hasn't really been that mainstream Hispanic star in quite some time. Like you have your indie darlings like the Lucha Bros, Phoenix and Pentagon, that are doing great things with AEW. You have ROH, which I think has done a really good job, pushing Roosh and Bandito, and some of the other just Hispanic stars that they're bringing in from Mexico right now. but I feel like there hasn't really been that mainstream star that, you know, our culture can really connect to or resonate. You know, they brought Rey Mysterio back to WWE, but at some point there's got to be someone that we look towards the future, and I don't really know when that's going to happen. You know, everyone kind of saw Andrade come in. They see these different masked wrestlers on the show that, you know, could be the potential future, especially with Legado the Fantasma right now on NXT that's, you know, doing big things as a faction. But I think I'd really like to see just that one, you know, Hispanic wrestler, because so many of them are capable. You have, you know, Grand Metalik, who is probably one of the best wrestlers, you know, in the world right now, that's just kind of back and forth in the tag team title scene, sometimes on TV, sometimes not. I think I just like to have, you know, just someone that we can really get behind, and as a culture really push for and believe, just the way Kofi had that, you know, support from the African American culture. I really want someone that we can all get behind and push towards, and, you know, hopefully get the kind of same result.
And coming in at the last minute, taking over for Ruthless Lala, is Daddy Louie from the Outer Rim. Daddy Louie, what do you think is going on for the post-COVID world of wrestling? What do you think is going to happen?
So I'm not as involved with wrestling as these guys are. I'm a fan, and you know, post COVID, I would just like to see. Obviously, I want to see promotions being able to go back on the road in places that they can't go right now. I'm a big AEW guy. I don't follow the WWE anymore because AEW did for me what WWE and WCW did back in the day. It made me feel good about wrestling again. And it just kind of came out of nowhere, and it just made me feel good about wrestling. And another thing that I like about AEW is that they have a lot of representation, right? So the very first AEW tag team champions, you know, one of the guys was Scorpio Sky, who they're now pushing to be a you know, a title contender. He's actually faced, I believe he faced John Moxley it was either John Moxley or Chris Jericho. But he faced one of those two for the AEW championship. Last week, he faced Cody for the TNT championship. So Scorpio Sky is fantastic. They push tag team wrestling hard over in AEW. You got the Lucha Brothers, who are just freaking, they're so good. So good, right? And you know, they have the first ever, I believe the first ever transgender female who was they just took the title from her recently, but she was, I think, the second women's champion over on AEW. But to answer your question specifically, I just want to see post-COVID, I just want to see the promotions being able to go back to what they were doing before, especially for me, AEW, because we were supposed to go in August, and then it got canceled. So
Yeah, like
NXT, actually, we were supposed to go in April, and then it got canceled. It got moved to August, and now it got pushed to next year. So they actually just started. I don't know how WWE is doing it, but AEW, I think last week and now this week, tomorrow, because their Wednesday promotion got pushed to Saturday because of the NBA Finals. They actually just started having fans, like socially distanced fans. You can buy tickets and go for like $30 because they're down in Jacksonville, Florida. So I don't know if WWE has started. I saw some memes on Facebook today about WWE putting like virtual fans like up in the stands and stuff like that. And there were people that were replacing all their pictures with like Super Smash Bros. Character pictures. So it looks like a giant Super Smash Brothers like character selection screen inside the SmackDown arena, or what I don't know what they called it, like the Battle Dome or something like that. SmackDown Dome.
Oh man. Well,
but
guys,
yeah, I just want to see that coming back.
Yeah. Well, guys, I hate to cut this short, but this is the end of our show. So I want to thank our guest. I want to thank Daddy Louie for coming in on Clutch. Thank you for coming on Nerds and Nights and representing our people of color in the sports entertainment field. So are there any last parting words, anything you want to plug? We'll start with Espirito Maya.
Yeah, I just want to, thank you guys, one, for having me on, and just want to plug my, Facebook page. If you can look me up as Espirito Maya, I pretty much post every single show, every single promotion that I have going on. Just look on there. I've got some new shirts coming out here soon, so keep an eye out for those at the merch table near you.
Rod Lee.
Just the same thing as Maya. Just thanks for having me. Follow me on Facebook at Rod Lee. Follow me on Instagram at Otaku Wrestling Dude, and my Twitter is at MC Rod Lee. And you can find my shirts and everything on ProWrestlingTees.com/Rod Lee. You can get one like this one. I really like Hamilton, if you can't tell. And yeah,
Well,
that's all I got.
John.
I have my show tomorrow here in Des Moines, Iowa. Like, you can buy the live stream on blackwrestlersmatter.com. If you plan on attending the show, like, the online ticket sales will go off at 9:00, so you have to get it now. You have about an hour. blackwrestlersmatter.bigcartel.com. I have Pro Wrestling Tees /American Fury, John West, and I think that's pretty much it. Like, I'm doing everything for the culture. I'm trying to make my brand as big as I can get it. Rod, you're a worker. Maybe I'll use you on a show one day. So never know.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I knew some people that are going to be on the show tonight, and I wish you guys luck. Or tomorrow. But I wish you guys luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at that. Nerds on Nice making connections. Well, everybody, this is Nerds on Nice. Tune in next weekend for the Cosmic Disaster Show when the CDS game discuss Blade Trinity. What does that have to do with wrestling? Tune in next week and find out. You can find Nerds on Ice under Circle of Nerds. And until next time, educate yourself and others, entertain yourself and others, and most of all, empower yourself and others. Tune in next week as we discuss the latest hot topic with more cool nerds. Until then, Chris Fury out.
All right, everyone, chill.
To hear all of our podcasts, look for Circle of Nerds on iTunes, iHeart, Pandora, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. And if you want to see these weirdos in their natural habitat, just look for Circle of Nerds on YouTube and Patreon. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.